My earliest memory isn't a birthday or a bedtime story. It's my father on fire. I must have been 4, maybe 5. We were at Warner Brothers, and Dad was doing a burn stunt for some B-movie with a name like Inferno Squad or Hell Jumpers. I wasn't supposed to be there. Kids weren't allowed on set, not that anyone in 1986 really cared. My mom had gone AWOL again, off on one of her retreats, so Dad had to take me with him. He told me to stay in the trailer, gave me a peanut butter sandwich and a stack of cracked magazines. But the second I heard the word action, I climbed out the back window and ran straight for the chaos. And there he was. My dad. Charlie Maddox. The man, the myth, the meat puppet. Standing in the middle of a fake alleyway with a gasoline gel slathered all over him, waving a match like he was lighting a candle. Then whoosh. The fire ate him whole. I remember screaming. I remember the smell, burnt rubber and singed hair. But mostly I remember the way everyone else just watched. Like it was normal. Like setting yourself on fire was no big deal if you did it for the right reason. If you yelled, "Rolling!" before you did it. He survived, of course. Walked away with only second-degree burns on his arms. I got grounded for sneaking out of the trailer, and he got a bonus check for nailing the take on the first try. That was my childhood in a nutshell. Pain turned into profit. Fear transformed into slow motion. My father spent his whole life falling, off buildings, off motorcycles, through sugar glass windows, and he made it look like flying. But what no one saw, what they never show you in those glossy DVD special features, is what happens when the cameras stop rolling. When the bones don't heal right. When the screams are real, and they come at 3 a.m. from the next room over. He taught Indiana Jones how to fall. But he never taught me how to stand back up. We lived in a trailer parked behind the old Ambassador Hotel. Not one of those sleek silver Airstreams either. Ours was beige and sun-bleached, the kind of place where the wallpaper peels like a bad sunburn and the ceiling leaks if someone coughs too hard. It smelled like Marlboros, Aqua Net, and something faintly metallic, maybe the residue of too many years spent duct-taping injuries and dreams together in the same tiny space. Every wall inside that trailer was covered with headshots and movie stills. My dad with a bandaged nose shaking hands with Spielberg. My dad midair behind Mel Gibson during a chase scene. My dad doubled over in laughter with Burt Reynolds, bruised ribs visible under a ripped tank top. You'd think he was famous. But he wasn't. He was the guy behind the guy. The name buried in the credits under stunts. No one ever asked for his autograph. Nobody knew that when Stallone punched a Russian in Rocky IV, it was my dad who hit the floor. He liked it that way, he said. Stars are porcelain, he used to mutter. We're steel. But steel rusts. Especially when it's left out in the sun for too long. The fall that broke everything happened in 1992. I was 15. We were shooting a movie, well, he was, but I was on set as his assistant. Which really meant I got to hold his coffee and pretend I was old enough to be there. The movie was Bulletproof Skyline, some straight-to-video cop thriller with a budget lower than its IMDb score. The director wanted practical stunts. No wires, no nets, none of that Hollywood magic. Just a man, a rooftop, and a 5-story fall onto a stack of cardboard boxes. It was supposed to be simple. He'd done it a dozen times before. But something was off. Maybe the angle. Maybe the wind. Maybe just the universe finally saying enough. He missed the boxes. I heard the crunch. I still hear it sometimes, tucked in the spaces between my dreams. He didn't scream. Just this dull, wet impact, like someone had dropped a sack of meat off a cliff. They airlifted him out. Crushed pelvis, shattered femur, 5 cracked ribs, internal bleeding. And something in his head that never quite healed. The doctors called it mild traumatic brain injury. But it wasn't mild. Not when your dad comes home and can't remember how to microwave leftovers. Not when he starts talking to people who aren't there. Not when he locks himself in the trailer bathroom for 2 days straight and tells you, with a blank stare, that he's waiting for the director to call. Cut. He never worked again. The insurance dried up. The residuals trickled in like pity. And then, one morning, he was just gone. No note. No goodbye. Just an empty closet and a missing duffel bag. I was 19. It's been 20 years. I live in Echo Park now, in a one-bedroom apartment that smells like thrift store vinyl and dog pee, even though I don't own a dog. I work freelance audio gigs, voiceovers, podcast editing, the occasional sound design for some indie short about robots and heartache. I don't do stunts. I don't even watch action movies anymore. Then last week, a woman named Vanessa called me. Producer for a streaming docuseries. She said they were doing an episode on forgotten legends of Hollywood. The ones who fell first, she called it. She wanted to interview me about my dad. You mean the guy who fell off the planet? I said. There was a pause. We found him. I dropped the phone. Not metaphorically. I actually dropped the phone. It cracked on the corner and everything. Where? I asked. A trailer in the Mojave. He hasn't left in years. I didn't say anything for a while. I just stared at the wall above my desk, where a faded photo of us sits in a crooked frame. He's got one arm in a sling, the other wrapped around me. We're both squinting into the sun. She offered to fly me out. Said they'd pay for gas, per diem, the whole deal. I said no. Then I said yes. Then I packed a duffel bag and threw it in the back seat of my beat-up Honda. I don't know what I'm expecting. Closure? Redemption? A good story to tell at bars. Maybe I just want to know if he remembers me. I hit the desert around dusk. The Mojave is a weird place, half post-apocalyptic movie set, half sacred wasteland. The sky stretches out like a bruise, and everything is colored in dying fire. I passed an old gas station with a cactus growing through the roof. Saw a rusted-out billboard for Coca-Cola, dated 1989. The past doesn't die here. It just bakes slowly under the sun until it forgets what it was. I pulled up to the address Vanessa gave me. There it was. His trailer. Same make and model as the one we used to live in. A little more rust, a little more defeat, but unmistakably his. I could feel it in my bones. I knocked on the door. Nothing. I knocked again, louder this time. The door creaked open an inch. He stood there. Same height. Same square jaw, though now covered in patchy white stubble. His hair was gone, save for a few tufts behind his ears. One eye was cloudy, the other sharp and suspicious. Derek? He said. My throat closed up. Yeah, I croaked. It's me. He looked me up and down, as if trying to figure out if I was real. Then he stepped aside and said, You want to come in? The inside of the trailer smelled like time. That specific, sour-sweet odor of old upholstery, dust, and cheap whiskey. Not booze from last night either, booze that had soaked into the wood grain years ago and never quite left. A familiar smell. Unpleasant, but weirdly comforting. Like hearing a song you used to hate because your dad played it too much, and now, suddenly, it's a memory. The layout hadn't changed. Kitchenette to the left, two narrow bunks to the right, a fold-out table in the middle where he used to draw diagrams of stunt setups with a golf pencil on napkins. The walls were plastered with yellowed Polaroids and torn-out pages from Variety. Except now, there were layers of dust on everything, and a broken VCR sat in the corner like a relic of some extinct religion. He limped back to a recliner that looked like it had been rescued from a junkyard and motioned for me to sit on a milk crate. No words yet. Just the kind of silence that screams between people who used to know each other, and don't anymore. He lit a cigarette with fingers that trembled. His wrist popped audibly when he lifted the lighter. You still smoke? He asked. No, I said. Quit when I turned 25. Good. Nasty habit. He took a drag, and I bit my tongue. The man reeked of contradictions. Always had. He didn't ask about Mom. I didn't bring her up. She died in 2003, heart failure, they said, though the doctors didn't have a word for the kind that creeps in when you've spent your life orbiting a man who only looks at you during scene setups. She stayed in LA after he left. Kept her job at the dry cleaners, drank white wine from the bottle, and chain-watched murder. She wrote reruns like they were sermons. She never talked about him. Not even when I tried. Especially not when I tried. Grief makes ghosts out of the living, and she became one long before she died. He asked if I wanted a drink. I said no. He poured two anyway. It was some bottom-shelf bourbon in a chipped glass, and when he handed it to me, I held it for a second before setting it on the table. He nodded like he expected that. So, he said finally, you're here. I am. Why? I thought about lying. About saying I just wanted to see him. That I missed him. That the years didn't matter and we could pick up where we left off. But I was tired of movie scripts. I was tired of pretending. There's a documentary. About forgotten stuntmen. They want you in it. He snorted. Forgotten, huh? You're the opener. Episode 1. Oh, good. That means I die first. He smiled, but there was something bitter behind it. Like he'd waited 2 decades for a punchline that wasn't worth the setup. I asked him if he remembered the fall. The one in '92. He looked out the window, at the desert like it might offer him a cue card. Parts of it, he said. I remember standing on the ledge. I remember the wind. I remember you yelling something before I jumped. I yelled your name. Yeah. That sounds right. He leaned back in the chair and closed his eyes. They said I hit the scaffold first. That it cracked 2 ribs before I bounced off and landed on the asphalt. Yeah. And then I was out for 2 days. 3. His hand twitched. The cigarette dropped to the floor, and he cursed softly before crushing it under a slipper that had no sole. Funny thing, he said. I didn't feel it. Not at first. I remember opening my eyes in the hospital and thinking, did we get the shot? I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because I didn't know what else to do with the sound in my throat. You didn't, I said. The camera jammed. He looked at me, and for a second, he was the dad I used to know. The one who would scream at busted gimbals and cheap producers and then take me for a milkshake like none of it mattered. No shit. No shit. We sat there a while. The desert light faded from gold to ash, and the trailer filled with shadows that moved when you weren't looking at them. He asked about my life, and I gave him the polite version: freelance gigs, decent apartment, no wife, no kids. He nodded like he understood. Couldn't hold one down myself, he said. A family, I mean. Not with the job. I wanted to scream. I wanted to say you had won. You left it. But the words stayed coiled in my chest like a rope with nowhere to throw. Instead, I asked, why here? Why the middle of nowhere? He shrugged. Quiet. No mirrors. What does that mean? It means I can't screw up what I can't see. That one hit me. Hard. Later, I helped him dig through a cardboard box of old tapes. Behind the VHS copies of Cobra Commando and Turbo Killers was a black Hi-8 camcorder and a stack of unlabeled cassettes. He handed them to me like they were sacred texts. I used to record rehearsals, he said. Choreos, falls, all of it. Nobody gave a damn, but I liked to watch myself work. Help me see the holes. I took the tapes. Promised to digitize them. Promised to send him copies. As I packed them into my bag, I looked at him and said, they think you're a legend. He didn't smile. Just shook his head. Legends don't run away. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. I wasn't built to finish things, Derek, he said quietly. Not marriages. Not jobs. Not even goddamn conversations. Everything I ever did, it had a start and a fall. That's what I was good at. The drop. I slept on the couch. Or tried to. The desert gets cold at night. That biting, dry cold that cuts through denim and old blankets like regret. I listened to the trailer creak. Listened to him cough in his sleep. At one point, I heard him mutter something. A line, maybe? Reset the rig. Over and over. He never woke up. When dawn came, I made coffee from his ancient tin of Maxwell House and waited outside. The sky turned pink, then gold, then blue. The sun rose like a flare behind the mountains, and for a second, the whole trailer looked like it was glowing. Like it had one last scene to shoot. He came out wrapped in a robe that might have been white once. Sat beside me on a lawn chair and lit another cigarette. I dreamed I fell again, he said. Did it hurt? He exhaled smoke and looked out at the sand. No. But I didn't land either. We didn't hug when I left. That wasn't our thing. He just slapped the roof of my car and said, Tell him the truth. What's that? He looked at me with those tired eyes and said, I was never a hero. Just a guy who didn't know when to say cut. I drove back to the city with the tapes in my bag and the desert in my lungs. I don't know what the documentary will do with his story. They'll probably cut it down to 15 minutes and wrap it in synth music and slow zooms. They'll call him a legend, maybe even a pioneer. But they'll never know the whole thing. They'll never know the nights I spent listening to his bones grind against themselves. They'll never know what it's like to love a man who only exists when the cameras are on. But I know. And maybe that's enough. The tapes hissed. Not the static kind. Not the clean digital fuzz you get when a codec glitches. This was different, organic. Like the sound of an old man breathing through his teeth. Each tape I digitized felt like I was exhuming something, some buried memory with a bad limp and a death wish. There were 10 of them. All unlabeled. All dusty and warped from years of desert heat. I borrowed a high 8 deck from a guy I used to know at a post house in Burbank, traded him a bottle of bourbon and an old shotgun mic I didn't use anymore. He warned me not to expect much. Magnetics fade, he said. Tape's like skin. It remembers, but it doesn't forgive. Still, I watched every second. The first tape was from 1984. My father's handwriting, barely legible, scrawled on the inside of the tape case. Jump test fountain lot. It opened on a lot full of broken props and stacked mattresses. The camera sat crooked, leaned against a sandbag or maybe a traffic cone, aimed at a makeshift tower made of scaffolding and plywood. And then there he was, Charlie Maddox, my father, younger than I'd ever seen him in motion. Shirtless, tan, chewing gum like he owed it money. He looked confident. Lighter somehow. Like gravity hadn't figured him out yet. He climbed the tower with the cocky grace of a man who hadn't fallen wrong yet. I heard someone off camera shout, "You sure about this?" And my dad gave a thumbs up without looking down. Then he jumped. Not a stunt fall. Not a prepped one. Just a leap. Full body, legs split, arms flailing, yelling, "Charlie!" Like it was a war cry or a punchline. He landed hard, bounced twice, rolled, and stood up laughing. "I'm still alive!" he yelled, hands in the air. Cut to black. Each tape was like that. Glimpses. 100 moments no one was supposed to see. Rehearsals for car rolls where he argued with coordinators about angles. Fights with producers over money. Long, static shots of empty parking lots, waiting for the next move. And every once in a while, I'd hear my own voice, tiny, high-pitched, asking dumb questions from off-camera. "Dad, does it hurt when you fall?" "Only when I stop." In one tape, I saw myself run into frame. Maybe age 6 or 7. My arms flung around his waist like I was trying to tackle a tree. He pretended to stumble back like I'd knocked him over. The way he laughed, I'd forgotten that sound. I sent clips to the documentary team. They lost their minds. Vanessa called me breathless. Said the footage was cinematic gold. Said they wanted to use the tapes to bookend the episode, open with the fountain jump, close with him in the desert. "There's an arc," she said. "A fall and a fade. You don't get stories like that anymore." I didn't correct her. I didn't tell her that stories like that never ended on a clean note. That behind every myth was a mess no one wanted to scrub through. Still, I gave her what she needed. Sent high-res transcodes and timecode logs. Even added a few audio notes, because that's what I knew how to do. I didn't tell my father. Not yet. One morning, I found myself driving to the valley. To the place we used to rent out for rehearsal stunts, an old warehouse behind a tire shop, long since condemned. I sat there in my car, staring at the rusted-out shell of it, and tried to remember what it sounded like when we used to fill it with fake gunshots and shouts. I remembered the time he taught me how to fall. Straight back, he said. Like your spine's a zipper. But won't that hurt? I asked. Of course it will. But if you know it's gonna hurt, you can decide how much. That stuck with me. Not because it was good advice, but because it was the only advice he ever gave me that felt honest. Vanessa called again a week later. The episode was almost done. She wanted me to come in and record a few voiceover pickups. Just bridge narrations, she said. Something to tie the past to the present. She asked if I'd be comfortable saying a few lines about his impact. His impact? I repeated. Yeah. How he influenced you. What he left behind. I almost laughed. Influence. What he left behind. Burnt Polaroids. A bent spine. Nightmares that smell like cheap bourbon and asphalt. Still, I said yes. Because that's what you do when someone points a mic at your pain and says, "This will only take a minute." The booth was dark. The kind made for NPR confessionals or true crime sob stories. They handed me a script. I read it. Then I put it down. Can I do one my way? I asked. The engineer nodded. Vanessa watched from behind the glass. I took a breath. My father didn't raise me. He rehearsed me. Pause. Every scene in our house had a stunt double. Every apology had a safety rig. Every I love you sounded like a line reading. Pause. But he jumped. He kept jumping. Even when it stopped being brave. Even when it was just habit. And that's what he left me. Silence. Vanessa looked at me through the glass with something close to pity. Cut, I said softly. That's all I've got. The episode dropped 3 weeks later. Streaming. Prime spot on the homepage. The Ones Who Fell First, Episode 1, The Fall Guy. His name trended for exactly 14 hours. Then it disappeared into the algorithm like everything else. I watched it once. Alone. At night. It was better than I expected. Clean editing. Good pacing. A few too many dissolves, but that's how these things go. They used the footage from the first tape. The jump. They added music under it. Made it feel like a baptism. The interviews were clipped. My words trimmed to sound wiser than they were. But they let one thing stay. The line about rehearsing me. That one hit. They ended the episode with a shot of him in the desert. Sitting in that busted lawn chair. The sun setting behind him. No words. Just him looking out at the horizon, blinking like it was trying to tell him something he'd forgotten. I turned the TV off before the credits rolled. 2 days later, he called me. Didn't even say hello. Watched it. I waited. You made me look decent. You made you look decent. I just gave them the tapes. Another pause. You think they'll remember me now? Does it matter? He didn't answer. Then, you want to come back out here sometime? We could. I don't know. Try again. I stared at the phone. I'll think about it, I said. That night I couldn't sleep. So I pulled up one of the tapes. Not one I'd sent in. One I'd skipped. The label inside just said, Holmes Maz 1989. It opened on our old trailer. A little plastic tree blinking in the corner. My mom cooking in the kitchenette. Me, in pajamas, ripping open a wrapped package with more duct tape than paper. Inside was a toy stunt car. Red, with flame decals. Now watch what it can do! My dad's voice yelled from behind the camera. I grinned. Crashed it into the couch. Laughed like the world had no weight. And then, from behind the lens, he whispered something I hadn't heard in 20 years. Someday you're gonna be better than me. I drove back to the desert 3 weeks later. No camera crew. No documentary check. No excuses. I didn't call ahead, didn't even tell him I was coming. Something about announcing it made it feel like a mission, and I didn't want to arrive with a purpose. I just wanted to arrive. That was new for me. For us. I brought groceries. Things I remembered he used to like: cans of Dinty Moore stew, packs of Camels, instant mashed potatoes, powdered coffee creamer. I tossed in a few fruit cups for good measure, even though I knew they'd rot unopened in the heat. He answered the door in the same robe, now even more threadbare than before. Didn't think I rated a sequel, he said. Consider this the director's cut. He stepped aside, and I walked back into the smell of heat and age. The living room, if you could call it that, was cleaner than before. Not by much, but noticeable. Fewer piles of junk. The recliner was vacuumed. The ashtray wasn't overflowing. Something had changed. You expecting company? I asked. He shrugged. Watched myself on a 65-inch screen. Felt like I ought to at least wash my hair. He hadn't. But he wanted to. That counted for something. We sat. I handed him the bag of groceries and he grinned like a kid on Christmas. Jesus, are these those gross potatoes I used to eat out of the pot? The very ones. He cracked open a can with a pocket knife that had no blade left and started eating with his fingers. You're a weird dude, I said. Takes one to raise one. That was the first time he'd called himself a father since I got there. We talked for hours. Not about the past. Not directly. The old memories hovered like dust in the air, but we didn't need to disturb them. Instead, we talked about dumb things. The heat. His busted swamp cooler. Whether Tom Cruise actually does all his own stunts. I told him about a podcast I was working on, a noir satire about a detective allergic to light. He laughed so hard he wheezed. Christ, you're a freak. You made me. He looked at me, mouth open like he wanted to argue. But instead, he just smiled. That night, after the sun went down and the desert turned to ash again, we sat outside. I brought a little Bluetooth speaker and played some old soundtracks he used to love: The Great Escape, Bullet, Raiders. He closed his eyes during the motorcycle chase theme and tapped his foot against the dirt. I remember showing McQueen how to slide, he said, his voice thick. He couldn't get the lean right. Kept stiffening up. Didn't they cut your scene? Hell yeah, they did. But he nailed the slide. I looked at him. Do you regret it? Giving your whole body to movies that forgot your name? He didn't answer for a long time. Then, sometimes I think I didn't give it to the movies. I gave it to the fall. The moment you leave the platform and there's nothing but air. That second right there? That's the only time I didn't hear the noise in my head. What noise? All of it. I didn't push him. I didn't need to. Some truths land better in silence. He pulled out a shoebox from under his chair. Inside were pictures I'd never seen. Not the glossy studio ones. Real ones. Him and my mom in Vegas, laughing with greasy hair and matching denim jackets. Me in a car seat, gripping a toy stuntman. A dog I didn't remember. He handed me one photo. It was me, around 9 or 10, sitting on his shoulders, both of us grinning like idiots. I look happy, I said. You were. I looked at him. Were you? He stared at the picture like it might answer for him. Sometimes, he said. But not in the way that sticks. That hit harder than it should have. We spent the next few days in a rhythm neither of us acknowledged. Coffee at dawn. Stories at lunch. Silence when the heat made everything still. He showed me how he rigged a dummy from scratch using PVC pipe and a wig from the Goodwill bin in Barstow. Said he dropped it from the roof sometimes, just to see if he still had it. You practicing for something? I asked. Nah. Just muscle memory. Ever think about doing one more? Stunt? I nodded. Hell no. I got bones like chalk. But later that night, I caught him testing his balance on a stack of cinder blocks, arms stretched out like a kid on a diving board. On my last day, I filmed him. Just for me. Nothing fancy. iPhone, no crew, no lights. I asked if he minded, and he said, "Only if you make me look fat." Then laughed like it was 1987 again. I asked him what he'd say if someone wanted to become a stuntman. He rubbed his chin, looked off into the horizon, then said, "Don't. But if you have to, if your skin buzzes when you're near the edge, if you can't sleep unless you've tasted danger, then learn how to fall. Not how to land. Landing's a lie. You never land. You just stop falling for a minute." Then, after a beat, he added, "And don't have kids." I kept the camera rolling. He looked right into the lens and said, "Unless you're gonna show up." That one hit me straight in the gut. I left around noon. He hugged me. No fanfare, no ceremony. Just a tight, old man grip that said more than any apology ever could. "You'll come back?" he asked. "Yeah. You promise?" "I promise." He nodded, like he didn't believe it, but maybe he wanted to. Back in LA, I stitched together a short film. Just for me. 10 minutes. No music. Just raw footage, intercut with bits of the old tapes. My voice reading parts of his stunt logs. The fountain jump. The rooftop rehearsal. The clip of him talking to me off camera while I opened that toy car. I called it Things That Don't Burn. I didn't submit it anywhere. Didn't post it online. I just watched it once, alone. Then I saved it to a hard drive labeled Maddox, Final Take. And that night, for the first time in years, I slept through without dreaming of the fall. I didn't plan to go back so soon. But 6 months after the documentary aired, I got a voicemail from a woman named Patrice. She said she was calling from the VA clinic in Ridgecrest. Said my father had come in with chest pains. Said he'd listed me as his emergency contact. Which was funny, considering I'd never known he had a veteran's record, let alone a file anywhere with my name on it. When I called back, they said it was nothing serious. Just dehydration. Maybe a panic attack. "He's back at home," Patrice said. "But he keeps asking if the shot was any good." I didn't need to ask which shot she meant. I loaded the car with a cooler full of Gatorade and canned soup. Threw in a stack of DVDs I'd burned for him, old movies he used to quote like scripture, The Dirty Dozen, Le Mans, The Wild Bunch. On a whim, I added the short film I'd made. Things That Don't Burn. Didn't know if I'd show it to him. Maybe I just needed proof I'd finished something. The desert looked the same. Time doesn't really pass out there. It just fades. When I pulled up, he was outside, hammering a bent piece of aluminum into something vaguely ramp-shaped. "Thought you were dead," he said without looking up. "Not yet." "Damn. I owe Patrice $5. He looked thinner. More brittle. Like someone had redrawn him with less ink. I asked about the hospital. He waved it off. "They said it was stress," he said. I said, "Buddy, if I was stressed I wouldn't be out here pretending to build a cannon." "You're building a cannon?" "Figuratively. It's a catapult. For the dummy." He pointed at a heap of PVC bones in a wig and a flannel shirt. "I want to see if I can still send a guy flying 15 feet. "Why?" He looked at me like I'd asked why the sky was rude. "Because it's what I do." Later, we sat in the shade of the trailer, eating cold stew out of the can. He asked if I'd seen the Reddit thread. I blinked. "You're on Reddit?" "No. But Patrice prints stuff out for me. Someone uploaded the doc. Called me the real Indiana Jones." He grinned. "Said I was a badass." "You are a badass." "Nah. I just hit the ground better than most." He paused. Looked at me with something quiet behind his eyes. "You know what's weird, Derek?" "What?" "My body doesn't remember the pain. Just the impact." That stuck with me. Like all his best lines. Half confession, half code. That night, he showed me a photo I'd never seen. It was a black and white still. Him, standing on a rooftop, arms out, wind in his hair. No wires. No safety harness. Just a sandbag taped to his ankle for weight. I was 23, he said. Didn't even know the guy was rolling camera. I flipped it over. On the back, written in red ink, leap first. Ask later. Was that your motto? Hell no. My motto was, who's paying me for this? But he smiled when he said it. We watched Le Mans on my laptop. Made it halfway before he dozed off, a lit cigarette burning down between his fingers. I plucked it out and set it in the ashtray. He muttered something in his sleep. The same phrase, over and over. Market! 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 I didn't recognize it at first. Then I remembered, it's what he used to say before every take. Before every jump, every crash, every dive. Market! Like a prayer. The body remembers. Even when the mind forgets. In the morning, he handed me a VHS tape wrapped in tinfoil. This one's different, he said. I played it on the portable deck. The image was shaky, black and white, barely legible. It was our trailer. Not this one. The old one. I saw myself, maybe 7 or 8, playing with my stunt car, launching it off the couch. Off-screen, my dad narrated in a whisper. That's my boy. That's Derek. He doesn't cry when it breaks. He just puts it back together. The tape cut to black. When I turned to him, he wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the horizon again. Why'd you film that? I knew one day you'd need proof. Of what? That I saw you. I didn't say anything. Just rewound the tape and watched it again. That afternoon, he tried the catapult. He loaded the dummy, adjusted the angle, and had me count down. 3, 2, 1. The launch was sad. The dummy flopped 6 feet forward and crumpled like a broken kite. God damn it, he muttered. Used to get 12 easy. You're 71. He grunted. 71 and still flying. Sort of. We sat in silence. Then he turned to me and said, If I go, I want to go mid-fall. None of that dying in bed crap. I looked at the dummy, its limbs twisted like a question mark. Promise me something, he added. Okay. When I'm gone, don't turn me into a story. I laughed. It's too late for that. I mean it. No voiceovers. No piano music. Then what? He picked up a pebble, threw it at the dummy. Just let the ground have me. That's all I ever wanted. That night, I showed him the short film. He didn't say anything the whole time. Just watched. Eyes glassy. Lips tight. When it ended, he exhaled. You made me look like I mattered. You did. Not always. That's not the point. He looked at me. Then what is the point? I thought for a second. Then said, that even things that fall apart can still mean something. He didn't respond. But the next morning, he asked if I had a copy he could keep. I left again. This time, I didn't cry. Didn't make a big speech. Just hugged him hard, handed him a USB stick with the film, and said, Backups in the cloud? He snorted. What cloud? The one that remembers you. He slapped my shoulder. Get out of here before you make me feel things. I did. Back in the city, I started writing more. Not screenplays. Not scripts. Letters. To him. I never mailed them. Just saved them in a folder called Maddox, ongoing. They weren't about anything big. Just small stuff. What I'd cooked. A podcast I liked. A song that reminded me of him. Sometimes I read them out loud in the booth, like he was on the other end of a radio line. Sometimes I think he is. The call came in late April. Patrice again. Same calm voice, same practiced delivery. She said my father had taken a fall? Not metaphorical, an actual fall. Tripped over a cable outside the trailer while hauling scrap metal. Cracked his hip. Fractured 2 ribs. They flew him to a bigger hospital in Bakersfield. He's awake, she said. But he's foggy. I asked what she meant. Sometimes he thinks he's still on set. Keeps asking for second takes. I didn't ask the obvious. How bad is it? I just packed a bag, grabbed my recorder, and drove north. Bakersfield's a cruel place to grow old, flat, hot, and full of strip malls. But he was there. So I went. The hospital room was big and humming. Machines beeped like polite reminders. He was asleep when I arrived, mouth open slightly, arms resting over the blanket like a wax figure of himself. I sat there for an hour before he stirred. His eyes opened slowly, landing on me with an uncertain kind of recognition. You missed the shot, he mumbled. What shot? The fire rig. Didn't go off. It's okay, I said. We'll reset. His eyes fluttered shut again, but a smile ghosted across his face. The next few days blurred. He drifted in and out, sometimes lucid, sometimes somewhere back in 1985. Once, I found him muttering blocking directions to an imaginary grip. Another time, he tried to swing a non-existent prop bat at an 4-pole. The nurse said he'd broken a plastic urinal the night before. Yelled stunned ready and threw it like a grenade. But sometimes he was there. He'd look at me and ask how the doc was doing. If anyone still watched it. If people said nice things. They said you had balls. He grinned. They weren't the ones who had to ice him. I sat by the bed and played clips from the tapes, his fountain jump, the slide he did behind a moving car, even that dumb catapult dummy he built. He watched it all like it was a home movie from another life. Was I good? He asked one night, voice weak. You were fearless. That's not the same thing. No, I said. It's not. One night, after the nurses left, I pulled out my recorder. I want to ask you something, I said. He blinked, alert. Shoot. If you could go back, not to undo anything, but to watch something again, what would it be? He didn't hesitate. Your first fall. I smiled. You remember that? Of course. We stacked those couch cushions up like they were airbags. Told you to tuck your chin and go stiff. I was 5. You were perfect. He coughed. It rattled in his lungs like a stunt gone wrong. I knew then, he said. You weren't like me. You didn't fall for the high. You fell because you trusted the landing. I fell because I knew you'd catch me. He looked away. I wish I always had. A week later, they discharged him into hospice care. Too brittle for surgery. Too proud to complain. I drove him back to the desert myself. He didn't say much on the ride. Just stared out the window like the sky was playing an old reel he hadn't seen in years. Smells different, he muttered as we pulled up to the trailer. It's cleaner. I aired it out. Don't do that. Makes it less mine. We laughed, but it wasn't really funny. In hospice, he got quieter. Not in a scared way. More like an actor between takes. Waiting for someone to yell, action, again. I stayed with him every night. We didn't talk about death. We talked about moments. The time he crashed a motorcycle through a glass wall. The time he missed his mark and broke his nose on a camera dolly. The time he carried me on his shoulders through a rainstorm, shouting lines from Die Hard like we were both in the movie. Every now and then, he'd reach for my hand. Not to hold it. Just to feel it was there. One morning, I woke up and he was gone. Not dead, just gone. He dragged himself out of the cot and was outside, sitting in that rusted lawn chair like it was a director's throne. The sun was barely up. The sky was bleeding orange. He was staring out into the nothing. You okay? I asked. Yeah. You hurting? Always. Silence. I just wanted to see it one more time, he said. What? The world before the light hits it. We sat there for an hour. Maybe more. The sun climbed. The wind stirred dust around our feet. He didn't speak again. Just nodded once, like he was giving the signal. That night I watched him sleep. And for a moment, he looked young again. Not wrinkle-free, not healed. Just unburdened. Like whatever weight he'd carried, whatever guilt, whatever shame, had rolled off his shoulders and sunk into the mattress. I knew it was close. I hit record. "Hey, Dad," I whispered. "This is your last look. Just me. No cameras. No crew. No fall this time." I waited. "I don't know if you hear me. But if you do, I want you to know the landing doesn't matter anymore. You're here. You made it." The machine hummed beside him. And then it didn't. I scattered his ashes behind the trailer. No ceremony. No bagpipes. No fake-ass eulogies. Just me. A thermos of gas station coffee. And his old boots, left out like they might walk off without him. I buried the dummy, too. Gave it a nameplate, The Last Stunt. My own little monument to everything he tried to say with his body because his mouth couldn't find the words. Then I walked back inside, loaded the tapes into my bag, and drove west. The next month, I recorded the first episode of my own show. It wasn't flashy. No sponsors. Just me and a mic. I called it Stunt Son. The pilot opened with his voice, pulled from one of the old tapes. "The trick isn't falling. The trick is pretending you meant to." Then silence. Then me. "My father never taught me how to stand back up. But he did teach me something else, that falling isn't failure. It's just the start of a different kind of story." The show got picked up. Modestly. Enough to keep it going. Enough to let me keep talking to him. Now, sometimes I go back to the desert. I bring a lawn chair. Sit where his used to be. And I wait for the sun to rise. Every once in a while, I swear I hear a gravelly voice beside me say, "One more take." And I smile. Because this one's mine. The desert doesn't forget. It doesn't record either. It just holds. That's something I've come to believe after spending so much time out here. Long after the funeral no one attended, after the embers of my dad's life were scattered behind the trailer, after the world went back to its programming, TikToks, layoffs, streaming wars, I kept coming back. I told myself it was to make peace with the past. But that wasn't it. Not really. I came back because the trailer still had things to say. The hospice staff hadn't cleaned much. That was on me. The cot was still in the corner, folded up like a long-forgotten prop. His oxygen tank sat beside the fridge, unused and hollow. I found one of his slippers under the sink. The other was on the roof. Classic. The tapes were gone, back in my apartment now, stored properly, digitized, organized, protected. But the residue was still here. The air still held the weight of unspoken things. And the floorboards still creaked like a body pacing through the night, even when I knew I was alone. That first week I slept there. On the couch. With the swamp cooler rattling and the stars buzzing overhead like old film grain. I'd press my phone to my chest and play his voice back, snippets from the documentary or clips I hadn't used. Don't be afraid of the hit. Be afraid of not getting up after. It was strange hearing him like that. Polished. Memorable. He'd spent his whole life being background noise, and now people were quoting him. Some podcast guy even DM'd me, asking if he could put my dad's line on a t-shirt. I said no. Some stories aren't merch. After a few days, I started going through his notebooks. They were in a plastic bin under the bed, sandwiched between a deflated football and a rusted harmonica. There were dozens. Spiral bounds, hotel pads, napkins. Stunt diagrams mostly. Fall heights. Rig angles. Skid maps with doodles of brake patterns and crash zones. But there were other things too. Scrawled on the backs of call sheets and receipts were fragments of something else. Unformed letters, maybe. Bits of dialogue. Regrets he'd started but never delivered. One napkin read, "Derek, if I taught you anything, I hope it was this. You can love something and still leave it. Doesn't mean you didn't love it." Another, taped to the inside of a VHS sleeve. "Sorry I made you my stunt double. You weren't built for that kind of pain." I sat on the floor and read until the pages blurred. until my chest ached with the weight of words that had waited too long to land. The next day, I did something stupid. I built the rig. Not a big one. Just a little setup outside the trailer. Some plywood. A basic crash pad. Just enough height to mimic one of the first stunts my dad ever taught me, falling backwards from a 5-foot platform. I stood on it, arms out, eyes closed. Straight back. I heard his voice say, "Like your spine's a zipper." And then I fell. It hurt. Not bad, but not great. My tailbone reminded me I was 37, not 17. But I laid there for a long time, staring up at the sky, dust in my teeth, heartbeat in my ears. It wasn't about the fall. It was about the reset. In the industry, a reset is when you do the whole scene over. You set the rig back up. You reset the glass, the wires, the fire marks. You pretend nothing broke, even though you know damn well it did. That's what I was doing in the desert. Resetting. I started writing a new piece. Not a short film. Not a podcast. Something slower. Stranger. A book. Memoir, maybe? Fictionalized. I wasn't sure. I just knew the first line. My father taught Indiana Jones how to fall. But he never taught me how to stand back up. I didn't know where the story would go. But I knew how it started. With a man, and a roof, and gravity pretending to be faith. The podcast grew. Stunt Son got picked up by a small network. They offered me an editor, a designer, even a publicist. I turned most of it down, except the editor. Her name was Riley. She liked the silences in my episodes. Said I let the grief breathe. She asked me once if I ever considered doing video. Would your dad have liked that? She asked. I thought about it. No. He liked being the body, not the face. Still, I sent her some of the digitized tapes. She cut together a trailer for the new season, grainy clips of my dad spliced between old interviews, paired with the audio of him whispering, "Just let the ground have me." It blew up. People reposted it with captions like, "This is cinema," and "Dad's man." Some guy wrote a think piece about how stuntmen are the unsung poets of our time. I didn't respond. But I printed it out and taped it inside the trailer. Dad would have hated it. One night, I dreamt of the fountain jump. Not the tape, the moment. But this time, I was the one on the scaffold. Shirt off. Gum in my mouth. Wind in my ears. My dad stood below, holding a walkie. "Whenever you're ready," he said. I stepped off the edge. I didn't land. I just kept falling. But I wasn't scared. The last time I visited the trailer, I brought someone with me. Her name was Jamie. Audio engineer. Met her through Riley. She laughed at my bad jokes and asked questions no one ever had. Like, what's it like knowing your dad's greatest role was the one no one saw? And, do you think he ever knew how to stop? I told her the truth. I don't think he ever wanted to. She helped me clean out the trailer. Wiped down the cabinets. Cataloged the notebooks. Took photos of the stunt diagrams. She asked if I wanted to sell the place. I said no. Some sets aren't meant to be struck. Before we left, I showed her the grave. It's not much. Just a metal plate under a mesquite tree. Reads Charles Maddox, last take, best take. She stood there a long time, quiet. He mattered, she said. Yeah, I said. He did. We sat on the porch and watched the sun melt into the hills. She reached for my hand. I let her. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a stunt double in my own life. Jamie moved in during the winter. Not into my apartment, into my life. Slowly. Like a light warming the corners of a dark room I'd been afraid to walk through. She didn't fix anything. She didn't try. She just sat with me in the silence, and let me decide when the reel should roll. She asked questions carefully, like she knew the answers might trigger explosions. Did he ever say he was proud of you? No. Do you think he was? Yeah. Some nights she'd pull out her portable recorder and hit record, just to catch the ambient sound of us doing nothing. Dishes clinking. Laughter under breath. My voice reading lines from the memoir I was writing. She said sound had memory. That it imprints. That frequencies carry pain in ways text never could. That made sense to me. I visited the trailer less. Not out of neglect. Out of respect. Like a stage you've performed on so many times you know the creaks by heart, you don't stop loving it, you just stop needing it. I kept it clean. Dusted the chair. Replaced the tarp on the roof after the wind tore it up again. Planted a wind spinner in the dirt beside the grave, cheap plastic, but it danced in the Mojave gusts like it had rhythm. I left a copy of the Stuntman Season 2 finale on cassette, labeled in black marker, "For you, play at sunset." It felt right. One day, a letter showed up. From the Academy. They were launching a new archive project, The Unsung Frame, honoring behind-the-scenes legends. They'd found the doc, the tapes, the write-ups. Someone, probably Riley, had sent them a package. They wanted to include my father. Not a statue. Not a red carpet. Just a plaque. A reel. A retrospective. Charlie Maddox, the body behind the blow. I almost said no. It felt too late. Like giving flowers to an empty seat. But I said yes. Because it wasn't for him anymore. It was for the next kid who wanted to fall. The ceremony was small. Private. Inside the Academy's library theater. 40 seats. 40 faces I didn't know. Stunt coordinators. Editors. A few actors who owed their best scenes to men like my dad. I gave a short speech. No tears. No theatrics. My father didn't want to be remembered. He wanted to be useful. He wasn't a star. He was the crash pad. He wasn't the face. He was the fire. He got hit so others could look good getting up. But behind every great story is someone who hits the ground first. So here's to the ground. And here's to the guy who taught me how to hit it with grace. They played the fountain jump. People clapped. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was clapping for a ghost. I got an email that night from a young stuntwoman in Atlanta. She'd found the doc. Binged the podcast. Said her dad was a stuntman too once. Said he drank himself into a coma when she was 12. Said Stunt Son made her feel like she wasn't crazy for missing a man who broke everything he touched. She ended the message with, "Thanks for making something that didn't look away." I read it 3 times. Then I called Jamie and cried into the phone like a child. The book came together slowly. It wasn't a memoir anymore. Not really. Too many half-truths. Too many stitched timelines and names changed for safety. I called it The Fall Guy's Son. Each chapter opened with a stunt description, as if the whole thing were a rigging manual. Reverse car hit, 35 miles per hour. Windshield break. No pads. First take. Then I'd tell a story about my dad's life. Or mine. Or both. You couldn't tell where one started and the other ended. That was the point. I dedicated it to the ones who fell first. It got picked up. Modest publisher. But real. Tangible. When the advance check came in, I used part of it to upgrade the trailer's insulation. The rest went into a trust, named after him, for young stunt performers who didn't have insurance. He would have rolled his eyes. But secretly he'd have been proud. Jamie and I got married in Vegas. Nothing fancy. Just 2 rings and a cheap motel room with a heart-shaped tub that barely drained. I wore a denim jacket. She wore boots. We toasted my dad with flat champagne and watched The Road Warrior in bed. She whispered, "He'd have hated this." I said, "Yeah. That's why it's perfect." Years passed. The podcast slowed down. The book found its niche. The desert stayed the same. I still visit the trailer. Now and then I bring students. Young stunt workers, indie filmmakers, people chasing the high of movement. I walk them through the grave, the catapult, the recliner where he used to cough through punchlines. I tell them what he told me. Landing's a lie. You just stop falling for a while. The trailer will collapse someday. The desert will take it. The sand will chew the tires. The roof will cave. The wind will erode the bones. But the tapes are safe. The voice is captured. The story is told. And me? I'm still here. Falling better every day. There's a sound a reel makes when it hits its end. If you've never used a film projector, you don't know it. It's subtle, just a soft flap 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 as the loose tail spins aimlessly, the picture long since gone. It's not loud. Not urgent. It doesn't scream stop. It just says this part's over. I hear that sound sometimes now, even when nothing's playing. Maybe because I'm starting to reach the end of my own reel. I'm 43 now. Still in Echo Park. Still cutting tape. Still narrating. But slower. More deliberate. Jamie and I have a kid, yeah? A boy. Dylan. He came fast, like a stunt no one rehearsed. 1 minute we were arguing over cribs, and the next I was watching his tiny chest rise and fall under hospital lights, wondering how the hell I'd ever keep him safe in a world I barely understood. The first time I held him, I felt something crack inside me. A bone I didn't know was still broken. My dad never held me like that. Not after a certain age. I think he was afraid I'd notice how rough his hands were. How many bones didn't set right. I don't hold back with Dylan. I want him to remember the weight of my arms. I want him to know I was there. When he turned 5, I showed him a clip. Not the doc. Not the tapes. Just one scene, Dad's fountain jump. The VHS had degraded in a way that made the edges shimmer. Like memory pretending to be water. Who's that? Dylan asked. That's your grandpa. Is he flying? Something like that. He watched, squinting. When the fall happened, he flinched. But when my dad stood up at the end, waving his arms in victory, Dylan laughed and clapped. That's cool, he said. But also dumb. I smiled. You're not wrong. One day I found him stacking pillows and couch cushions in the living room. I stood in the doorway and watched without speaking. He climbed onto the coffee table, arms out like wings. Then he stopped. Dad? He asked. Can I fall now? That one sentence shattered me. Because he asked? He waited. I walked over and knelt beside him. You can't, I said. But only if you tell me where it's gonna land. He pointed. We adjusted the pad. I counted him down. 3, 2, 1. He fell. Straight back. Chin tucked. Perfect form. When he hit, he laughed so hard he rolled off the pillow mountain. You did it, I said. You caught me with cushions. Yeah, but the point is, you knew I would. The trailer still stands. Barely. Its walls are warped. The siding has peeled. Some desert kids spray-painted a skull on the door, which I didn't erase. It fits. I still go out there, maybe twice a year. Sometimes with Jamie. Sometimes alone. Dylan hasn't seen it yet. I'm not sure if I want him to. Not because I'm ashamed. But because it's hard to explain that this rusted, sun-split box once held everything I feared and loved. That it wasn't just a home. It was a wound. And some wounds shouldn't be turred. The trust in my dad's name grew. More stunt performers started applying. People I'd never met sent thank you letters. Photos of ice packs on elbows. Stitches on foreheads. Smiles under bruises. One girl mailed me a note that said, Your dad paid my rent after I shattered my tailbone, doubling a man who made $10 million. I kept that one on my desk. That's the thing about falling, you never do it alone. There's always someone watching. Always someone who resets the rig. A few months ago, I found a new tape. It was in the back of a filing cabinet I'd lugged into storage years ago, buried under tax receipts and old gig contracts. A high-8 cassette in a cracked plastic case labeled, Derek, 2002, Don't Erase. My heart did a weird thing when I slid it into the deck. The video opened on my father. Not a stunt. Just him, sitting in the trailer, younger than I remembered, holding a can of beer and looking at the camera like it was a friend he hadn't seen in years. Okay. So, this is for if I don't make it. Or if I just stop making sense. Or if you decide you hate me and need something to burn. He laughed. Rubbed his jaw. I know I wasn't good at the whole dad thing. I got the stunt part down. I could leap, break, burn, bounce. But being still? That's where I failed. He looked off screen. But I saw you. You weren't like me. You didn't need to be in motion to matter. He leaned in, serious now. Don't carry my fall. Please. Don't wear it like it's yours. A long pause. Then, softly. I love you. Even when I forgot how to show it. Static. End. I showed Jamie. She cried before I did. I showed Dylan, years later, when he was old enough to ask where his grandfather was buried. He's part of the desert, I said. But this is his voice. After the tape ended, Dylan asked if he could record something. We set up the mic. He cleared his throat. This is for my grandpa. I never met you. But my dad says you could fall like nobody else. I think I got that part in me too. So thanks for being the start of it. Even if you didn't stick the landing. He looked at me after. Too much? No, I said. Perfect. Sometimes I wonder what my dad would think of all this. The podcast. The book. The trust. The trailer with a broken wind spinner marking his grave. A kid named Dylan carrying his jawline and his need to jump off things. I think he'd laugh. Then light a cigarette, shake his head, and say, I was just trying to make rent, kid. But I also think he'd be proud. Not in a loud way. In the quiet, twilight way. Like a man watching a sunset alone and realizing he left behind something worth watching. Now, when people ask me what my father did, I don't say stuntman. I say, he took the hits so others could shine. He built a life out of bruises. He didn't leave much behind, except a name that still lands hard. And when they ask if I miss him, I say, every time I hit record. It's strange how stories end. Not with a climax. Not with a bang. But with a choice. A slow, quiet moment when the camera stops moving and someone whispers, cut. Not everyone hears it. But I do now. Dylan's older. 10 going on 40. He's got my eyes and my dad's chin. That crooked, defiant little cleft that says, I dare you. He's already outgrown 2 skateboards and 1 bike. Scraped knees like a badge of honor. Teeth missing. Bruises blooming like little sunrises on his legs. He asked to do a stunt for his school project. A real one, he said. Not just acting. Like you and Grandpa used to do. I almost said no. Reflex. But instead I asked, what kind of stunt? Falling off a table onto cushions. Like in the video. He meant the one from the tapes, me at 7, flopping off the couch with reckless trust while my dad narrated behind the camera. I said okay. We set it up in the backyard. Jamie filmed. Dylan stood on the picnic table, arms out like a tiny, reckless god. You ready? I asked. Yep. Then give me the line. He grinned. Stunt ready. He fell. Perfect form. He landed hard, laughed harder. Looked up at me, breathless. Did I do it right? I nodded. Yeah. Nailed it. And in that second, I felt the loop close. 3 generations of Maddox men. All learning how to fall. The trailer didn't make it through the last sandstorm. I got a call from a guy who keeps an eye on the place for me when I'm not around. Said the west wall had collapsed. Roof torn open. Water damage from a freak rain. You wanna salvage anything? He asked. I said no. Some sets aren't meant to be rebuilt. Still, I drove out. One last time. The grave was still there. The wind spinner was bent, but it still turned slowly, like it was remembering something on a loop. I stood in the wreckage. Touched the busted chair where my dad watched his final sunrises. Closed my eyes. He wasn't in the wood, or the sand, or the sky. I know that now. He was in the sound. The weight of breath before a fall. The grunt when you hit. The silence right after. I sat down on a concrete block and hit record on my field mic. Then I said the last thing I needed to say to him. We're good now. The book came out in paperback. Found its audience. Taught a college class about audio storytelling. Hosted a panel at the academy. Yeah, that academy. Talked about legacy. About myth. About how some men only find their voice when they're on fire. I didn't mention the burned scars. But I showed the real. The fountain jump. The dummy catapult. The hospital whispers. The last look. People cried. Then clapped. But I didn't hear it. I was listening to something else. A whisper in the back of my head. Mark it. The last episode of Stunt Son dropped on the anniversary of his death. 5 years. 50 episodes. The final one had no intro music. No sponsors. Just my voice raw. This isn't about falling anymore. It's about what you do after. My father never taught me how to stand back up. But he showed me it was possible. With enough bruises. Enough silence. Enough time. I played one last clip of him, laughing, full and real, from one of the rehearsal tapes. Still alive. Then I let the tape run out. Flap, flap, flap. Then nothing. I kept the mic on. For a minute. Maybe more. Because sometimes the most important part is what happens after the voice stops. That's when you hear the truth. The quiet. The breathe between takes. The ache of being seen, then gone. I don't tell people my father was a stuntman anymore. I tell them this. My dad taught Indiana Jones how to fall. But I taught my son how to stand back up. And they always smile. Because they think it's a happy ending. But it's not. It's something better. A landing.